What if I told you wealth was never the final goal? What if everything you're gaining right now is actually preparation for something that will outlive you? Chosen one. This message didn't just scroll into your life by chance. You were led here by divine timing, by sacred design. There's a stirring in your spirit that even you can't fully explain. A shift, a pull, a weight of responsibility wrapped in favor. Because what's happening in your life right now is not just about money. It's not just about the numbers in your bank account. This is legacy work, eternal work, and heaven has placed the pen in your hands. You're not just getting rich, you're rewriting your bloodline. Before we go deeper, take a holy pause and type 777 in the comments right now. That's not just a number, it's a prophetic sign that you're aligning with the frequency of heaven. You're ready to break every generational curse and build something that cannot be erased. And to every single soul who's supported this movement through super thanks, thank you. Truly, your honor, your generosity, your belief in this sacred space, it's not going unnoticed. You are not just viewers. You are builders of this mission, co-heirs of a rising spiritual legacy. I speak blessings over your seed, because what we're about to break down isn't just information, it's divine activation. 8 revelations are about to open your eyes to why things are shifting, why you're being called higher, why your wealth isn't just for you, it's for your grandchildren's grandchildren. Not everyone will stay till the end, but those who do, they'll see what God has been setting up all along. Let's go deeper. God's chosen ones, you're not just getting rich, you're creating a legacy. Chapter 1. The Shift from Survival to Legacy. There was a time when survival wasn't just a season for you, it was your entire ecosystem. You didn't just pray for daily bread. You fought to breathe through nights that tried to swallow your calling whole. But your survival wasn't a sign of failure. It was the sacred crucible. While others were chasing comfort, God was cultivating character within you that could not be bought or broken. You weren't behind, you were being built. Like clay held in the kiln of affliction, every fire you endured was heaven's way of hardening your foundation so it wouldn't crack under weighty assignments. What if the pain wasn't punishment, but preparation? What if the delays weren't denial, but design? You gave when you barely had a pulse left in your finances. You forgave while you bled internally. You praised even when your voice trembled from exhaustion. This was more than grit. This was sacred training. You weren't in a waiting room. You were in heaven's academy for architects. God wasn't just getting you through. He was teaching you the psychology of persistence, the mathematics of trust, and the architecture of spiritual weight-bearing. But he knoweth the way that I take. When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. Job 23:10. While others leaned on networks, you leaned on heaven. You learned to discern frequency shifts in silence, to decode spiritual patterns in isolation. You were not being punished, you were being positioned. God was turning your mind into fertile ground, not just for thoughts of survival, but for visions of legacy. Now everything is shifting. The internal alarm that used to scream, "Am I safe?" has transformed into the divine whisper, "What am I called to build?" You're no longer trying to escape, you're ready to establish. You've stopped praying for exits and started asking for blueprints. Can you feel the shift? You are no longer a wanderer, you're a founder, and founders don't chase attention until they cultivate substance. You're stepping into a season where God is entrusting you with wealth, not for luxury, but for legacy. This is kingdom capital, destined to break generational chains, birth visions, and fund movements, just like Joseph in Egypt, whose years in prison were preparing him to manage a famine. Your confinement prepared your capacity. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Genesis 50:20. Consider the life of Malachi Torres, a modern-day social architect raised in the slums of Lima. Once a child beggar, he used every scar as a map to build schools for children like him. When asked why he never flaunted his wealth, he said, "I wasn't raised to make money. I was raised by pain to build futures." That's the difference between income and impact. That's legacy. Yet for every legacy builder, there's a cautionary tale. Andrew Wakefield, a former British physician, manipulated scientific data and launched false fears about vaccines, disrupting global health for decades. Why? Because he chased significance without surrender. When ambition is uncoupled from integrity, it creates destruction masked as discovery. Who are you becoming as you build? Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Psalm 127:1. Legacy is silent but strategic. The sequoia tree grows in groves, not alone. Its roots intertwine underground, creating an invisible web of strength. Like you, its greatness isn't loud, it's linked. You're not growing for applause, but for alignment. The impact you're cultivating will outlive your name, like roots that hold the earth long after the leaves fall. Legacy begins in your mind, rewiring neural pathways, elevating your questions. No longer, will I be okay? Now, what ripple effect will my obedience set in motion? The righteous man walks in his integrity. His children are blessed after him. Proverbs 27. You're not called to shine, you're called to seed. And seeds die before they multiply. Your tears watered them, your losses fertilized them. Now, harvest is not just on the horizon, it's in your hands. The provision coming to you isn't just to elevate your life, but to emancipate others. Can you see it? That the healing flowing through your lineage didn't start from a seminar. It started from your silence, your integrity, your unseen surrender. You're not trying to leave behind wealth. You're trying to leave behind wholeness. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. Proverbs 13:22. This is what the enemy feared. Not your income, your insight. Not your riches, your resonance. He attacked your mind because he knew if you ever upgraded your internal frequency from fear to vision, you'd shift timelines. And now, it's happening. You're not just becoming wealthy, you're becoming a wellspring, an origin of healing frequencies for generations you'll never meet. Now to him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, to him be glory. Ephesians 3:20-21. You're rising not just to collect, but to correct. You're building homes of wholeness, systems of justice, institutions of restoration. You are walking in divine inheritance. You're not afraid of lack anymore. You're afraid of wasting purpose. You don't desire status. You desire impact. This is why God chose you, not for your perfection, but for your consistency in chaos. You didn't wait until you were secure to be faithful. You praised when logic said you shouldn't. And now you're not just rising, you're radiating. Your life is no longer a reaction to pain. It's a response to divine purpose. This isn't prosperity. This is prophecy. This isn't excess. This is establishment. This isn't ego. This is eternal design. You are not just getting rich. You are becoming a builder of legacies, an architect of freedom. This is your moment, and the world won't even see it coming until it's already standing. Chapter 2. Why you had to lose first. Chosen one. It didn't feel fair. It didn't feel holy. It didn't even feel survivable at times. But chosen one, you had to lose first, and it wasn't because you failed. It was because heaven was forming you for something heavier than applause. Legacy. The silence you experienced wasn't neglect, it was strategy. The betrayal wasn't punishment, it was pruning. Every closed door was an invisible doorframe for a future structure God was about to help you build. You weren't being shut out, you were being set apart. Have you ever wondered why God didn't step in when you cried out with everything in you? Have you questioned why He let you sit in scarcity when He owns everything? Because loss in the divine curriculum isn't the end, it's the entrance exam. Before I was afflicted, I went astray, but now I obey your word. Psalm 119, verse 67. You had to know how it feels to be rejected, not so you'd live in fear of it, but so you'd never reject others once elevated. You had to be underfunded and underestimated so pride wouldn't poison your platform later. God was hollowing you out, not to break you, but to make room for glory. Think of Ruth gathering leftovers in foreign fields after losing everything. What looked like loss was actually alignment. Her obedience positioned her to become the grandmother of kings. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him. Romans 8:28. Your version of not enough was not a divine oversight, it was a sacred oversight. God was personally overseeing your refinement, because what you're carrying now requires spiritual infrastructure, deep roots, not shallow applause. In the field of architecture, the taller the building, the deeper the foundation. Your setbacks were soil excavations, digging down to bedrock, so what God builds through you won't collapse under pressure. What looked like delay was divine engineering. And when you had to sit in rooms where you felt invisible, it wasn't rejection, it was soul compression, like coal under weight becoming a diamond. Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that He may lift you up in due time. 1 Peter 5:6. Me bring you to a story, not ancient but timeless. Amara Jensen, a ballet dancer from Denmark, lost her leg in a car crash at 23. Her entire world collapsed overnight, but in that valley she learned choreography of the soul. She became a mentor for disabled athletes and founded the Phoenix Movement, a global organization funding prosthetics for children in war zones. Amara didn't just dance again. She taught others to rise from ashes. The loss trained her hands for miracles. Now, contrast her with Martin Shkreli, a former hedge fund manager and pharmaceutical CEO, once known as Pharma Bro. He raised the price of a life-saving drug, Daraprim, from $13.50 to $750 per pill overnight. It was pure economic opportunism at the expense of the vulnerable. For a moment it looked like success. His portfolio expanded, his media presence exploded, but the rise was hollow. In 2017, he was convicted of securities fraud and sentenced to 7 years in prison. His empire didn't collapse because of scarcity. It collapsed under the weight of his own selfishness. His legacy is not a crown, but a caution sign. Because unchecked ambition without compassion becomes a curse, not a calling. For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Mark 8:36. When a forest burns, it releases nutrients that were once trapped. It looks like death, but it's actually renewal. And you, chosen one, were being refined, not ruined. You lost much, but heaven was releasing what was buried. You weren't being emptied to punish you, but to prepare your soul to hold more. Have you noticed how deeply you now feel for others? How generous you've become, even without abundance? That's the mark of those who've bled in silence. That's what separates donors from kingdom builders. Legacy builders don't just give from abundance, they give from empathy. They remember the taste of lack. They steward blessings with sensitivity because they know what it's like to cry with an empty plate and a full heart. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Matthew 5:4. In the language of quantum physics, every loss was a frequency reset. God was retuning your vibration from anxiety to alignment. Every disappointment sent shockwaves through your spiritual DNA, breaking what was false, activating what was buried. There's a story of Elias Moreno, an ex-convict turned community developer. After losing 15 years to addiction and incarceration, he started planting gardens in food deserts. "I lost everything," he said, "but I found something bigger than myself, purpose." His gardens feed 700 families today. That's not just reformation, that's spiritual infrastructure. You lost to learn how to receive without ego. You lost to gain sight beyond what's glittering. You lost so the next time you win, you'll recognize the win isn't in the wealth. It's in what the wealth builds. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. Luke 16:10. That's why now, as provision begins to flow, you won't just spend, you'll sow with strategy. You'll fund what heaven funds. You'll see money as seed, not status. You'll build shelters for the bruised. You'll create scholarships for those whose dreams are still breathing under rubble. You'll be the answer to prayers you once prayed in pain, because what's coming to you is sacred, and only sacred vessels can carry sacred things. And you are that vessel. You won't hoard, because you remember what it felt like to lack. You won't crush others, because you recall what it meant to feel small. You'll move like rivers, not dams. You'll multiply what broke you. You'll resurrect what death claimed. But now that resurrection is near, can you feel why the pain had to precede the promise? So don't curse the loss. Bless it. It gave you vision with roots, generosity with memory, power with perspective. The loss didn't disqualify you. It qualified you for a throne you never chased, but were always designed for. And now, the one who wept in secret is about to build in public. Yes, chosen one, you had to lose first, because what you're about to carry isn't normal, it's eternal. Chapter 3, The Responsibility of Divine Wealth. Chosen one, the wealth that is approaching you isn't ordinary. It's sacred architecture designed by heaven and custom built for purpose. That's why God didn't allow it to arrive on your timeline. He waited until your motives matured, until your frequency rose from survival into stewardship, until your soul no longer craved applause, but alignment. This next level of abundance isn't coming to flatter your ego. It's coming to fulfill an eternal ecosystem that God has trusted you to nourish. You prayed for overflow, but did you realize overflow reveals who you are more than lack ever could? Have you noticed how lack refined you, but abundance will require you to reign? Before God deposits divine currency into earthly vessels, He conducts a soul audit. He doesn't just inspect your pockets, He inspects your pulse. The blessing of the Lord brings wealth without painful toil for it. Proverbs 10:22. And yet, wealth without worship becomes idolatry in disguise. That's why He had to remove the sediment of comparison, strip the plaque of performance from your heart, detox the subconscious need to be validated by material things. Divine wealth cannot dwell in divided motives. He had to be sure you'd use it not to compete, but to complete, not to showcase yourself, but to strengthen others. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace. 1 Peter 4:10. This next dimension you're entering is one where financial elevation meets prophetic responsibility. You're not just being blessed to enjoy, you're being blessed to equip. You'll be entrusted with decisions that shape destinies, not just deposits. You'll be called to fund blueprints that seem impossible, to raise voices that were once silenced by poverty. Just like Nehemiah, called to rebuild Jerusalem's walls from rubble, you've been burdened for broken systems. Nehemiah didn't just build, he budgeted, he sourced, he strategized. and he wept before he worked. Your divine wealth is arriving not just with opportunity, but with intercessory responsibility. Whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward them for what they have done. Proverbs 19:17. But understand, this isn't just generosity, it's governance. You're being positioned as a kingdom financier, a divine distributor. Your bank account is about to become a battlefield where heaven's will is accomplished through your yes. Sister Alondra James, a retired schoolteacher from Memphis. After 30 years in education, she received an unexpected inheritance from a distant cousin. Instead of retiring in luxury, she bought a condemned building and turned it into a safe house for girls escaping trafficking. She said, "God didn't bless me to disappear. He blessed me to deliver." That's divine wealth with divine clarity. But not everyone stewarded increase this way. Look at Elizabeth Holmes, founder of Theranos. Once hailed as the youngest self-made female billionaire, her empire was built on deception, not destiny. She promised revolution but delivered ruin. Her obsession with perception over process led to criminal fraud. She had the platform, but lacked the internal scaffolding to sustain it. Her fall was not financial, it was foundational. That's what happens when people touch divine realms with unclean hands. If you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? Luke 16:11. Even in physics, we know that energy, when contained in the wrong structure, causes explosion, not expansion. And so it is with divine wealth. Without the vessel being reinforced, it collapses under sacred weight. You're not just being called to receive wealth. You're being called to recalibrate the temperature in every space you walk into. Have you sensed lately that rooms feel different when you enter? That atmospheres shift? Not because of your clothes, but because of your calling. You are a thermostat, not a thermometer. You're not here to measure environments. You're here to raise them spiritually, emotionally, and economically. In the wild, elephants walk in matriarchal herds, and when one finds water, she doesn't drink alone. She stomps the ground, signaling others to come. That's you now. You've located provision, but it's not for solo consumption. It's for tribal liberation. Isaiah Vega, once a homeless poet in the Bronx, kept writing prayers into subway walls. A philanthropist discovered his writing, offered him a grant, and he used it not to escape, but to build a literacy center inside the same neighborhood shelter he once slept in. He said, "I never wanted wealth. I wanted windows, and now I open them for others. What if what you're carrying isn't just about resource, but about restoration? Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, but to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share." 1 Timothy 6:17-18. Chosen one, this is why the warfare hit so hard before the breakthrough. It wasn't about the money, it was about the mission. The enemy doesn't panic when you receive. He panics when you remember the poor, when you rebuild temples, when you invest in mines instead of malls. You're no longer thinking in accumulation, you're thinking in activation. You're not chasing luxury, you're launching legacies. You're not trying to shine, you're trying to shift cultures. You'll be called to fund kingdom tech, to build sanctuaries, to restore broken schools, to finance the silent prayers of communities gasping for air. And God trusts you, not because you're flawless, but because you didn't fold. When it was hard, you stayed obedient. When it was barren, you still sowed. When it didn't make sense, you didn't stop showing up. Now ask yourself, what mountains will move when I give from my scars, not my surplus? You are a distributor of divine currency, a carrier of spiritual capital, a builder of economic ecosystems that reflect heaven's justice. Prepare your hands not just to receive, but to release. Prepare your mouth not just to celebrate, but to speak freedom. Prepare your life not just to prosper, but to pour. Because this next realm of wealth isn't for display, it's for deployment. And you, chosen one, have passed every test. You are ready, not because you're perfect, but because you're trusted. Chapter 4. You're building what they couldn't finish. Chosen one, you must understand, your life is not random. You're not just breathing to survive. You were sent into this bloodline, this era, this generation on assignment. You are not just living your own story. You're completing a sacred work that was started before you ever arrived. A divine construction paused by time, trauma, and limitations. Many who came before you hoped, but were never handed blueprints. They survived the flood, but never had the tools to rebuild. They carried dreams in their hearts, but died with them buried beneath burdens they never had language to describe. They were warriors, but they were also weary. And still, they paved just enough road so that you could walk further than they ever imagined. Have you ever wondered why your life feels unusually intense, like you're carrying weight that doesn't belong to you? Why your warfare seems older than your age, deeper than your decisions? Because it is. You're not just fighting your battles, you're breaking patterns stitched into the spiritual DNA of your lineage. You are rebuilding ancestral ruins, reactivating destinies that were frozen by fear, oppression, addiction, and silence. You're not the beginning, you're the turning point. Your people will rebuild the ancient ruins and will raise up the age-old foundations. You will be called repairer of broken walls. Isaiah 58:12. What they couldn't finish, you've been anointed to complete. That's why your tears fall heavier. That's why your decisions feel more permanent. You were born not just with breath, but with divine architectural memory embedded in your bones. The assignment is generational, the blueprint is ancient, the materials are sacred, and the call is not optional. Your ancestors tilled the soil of suffering. They worked jobs that broke their backs. They stayed in relationships that starved their joy. They endured systemic injustice without the tools to fight back. But they prayed, even if their prayers had no words. They groaned in silence, and heaven heard them. You are the answer to their groanings. Before they call, I will answer. While they are still speaking, I will hear. Isaiah 65:24. You're the first to speak out loud what others only dared to whisper in secret. You're the first to walk through doors that were once bolted shut by history, class, and curses. You're holding what they could only dream of: language, freedom, healing, voice. Camila Ortega, a civil rights historian from El Salvador. Her grandfather was a field worker who never learned to read. She became the first in her family to earn a doctorate, and instead of climbing alone, she founded the Legacy Bridge Foundation, offering scholarships to children of undocumented immigrants. I write books, she says, because my ancestors weren't allowed to write their names. That's what finishing the unfinished looks like. But not everyone who inherits legacy handles it wisely. Johan Mertens, a real estate heir from Belgium, inherited an empire built by his great-grandfather's sacrifice during wartime reconstruction. But Johan used it to fund gambling rings, bribe politicians, and launder money through luxury projects. Within 7 years, he had not only bankrupted the estate, but buried its name in scandal. His ruin wasn't financial, it was foundational misalignment. Legacy cannot survive where ego replaces reverence. By wisdom, a house is built, and through understanding, it is established. Proverbs 24:3. Every time you forgive a parent who didn't know how to love you, you break a pattern. Every time you choose honesty over silence, you redeem a past built on secrets. Every time you plant hope in the soil of your pain, you are fulfilling a promise that began generations ago. You are the carrier of rain where there was once only drought. Giant redwood trees thrive because of the underground networks formed by older trees. Some trees die, but their roots still feed the living. What you are growing is not just for you, it's built on what was buried. You are not weak for feeling tired. You are a spiritual excavator, digging up things others buried and didn't want to confront. That's why you felt the attacks on your mind, your money, your identity. That's why every decision feels costly, because your construction site isn't just personal, it's prophetic. Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Psalm 127:1. You are carrying intergenerational assignments. The trauma that took down 4 generations before you is now trembling because you didn't collapse. You cried, you stumbled, but you didn't quit. And now, heaven is placing tools in your hands that no one in your lineage has ever held. You have the time they weren't allowed. You have the vision they were denied. You have the faith they were forbidden. And you have the favor that was stored up through the faithfulness of those who came before you. You were not chosen randomly. You were deployed strategically. Have you realized that every act of healing you choose is a brick in a foundation for those who come after you? That every decision to break silence is actually building strength into future generations? Ezra Baptiste, a once incarcerated chef in New Orleans, came from 5 generations of poverty and gang affiliation. After prison, he opened the Healing Table, a community kitchen where returning citizens cook meals for at-risk youth. We're not feeding mouths, he says. We're feeding memory. That's what legacy construction looks like. I will pour out my spirit on your offspring and my blessing on your descendants. Isaiah 44:3. Chosen one, this is why you've felt isolated, why you've had to carry burdens you didn't create, why your life has looked more like a battle than a blessing, because you are the first in your bloodline to walk in revelation, not just survival. You are the first to say, it ends with me and it begins with me. You are not just chosen, you are called, you are commissioned, you are anointed to finish what others could not, and this is not pressure, it is privilege. So rise in your assignment, build with honor, lead with healing, speak with holy defiance, because you are the fulfillment of a prophecy they never got to see. You are the blueprint they prayed would walk. You are the vessel they asked God to raise up, and now He has. Chapter 5. You're not just gathering money, you're gathering purpose. Chosen one, let's make something clear. If your goal was simply wealth, you would have taken shortcuts long ago. You had access to open doors that offered fast profit, instant attention, and external validation. You could have signed contracts, accepted offers, or partnered with people who promised to change your life. But deep down, you felt it. The transaction wasn't worth the transformation it would cost. That check came with chains. That applause came with a silent agreement to abandon your assignment. So you walked away, not because you didn't need the money, but because your soul refused to sell itself. And in that refusal, you became spiritually dangerous. Have you ever paused to consider how many good opportunities were actually traps dressed in success? Have you wondered why your discernment rejected doors that others would have celebrated? Better is a little with righteousness than great revenues with injustice. Proverbs 16:8. God was training your discernment to override desperation. Every time your spirit whispered no when everything around you said yes, that was divine strategy. Every time your gut tightened in meetings that looked right on paper but felt wrong, in atmosphere, heaven was preserving your purpose. You weren't just saying no to a deal, you were saying yes to your destiny. You were never meant to chase riches, you were designed to carry revelation. You weren't called to worship wealth, you were chosen to steward it with sanctity. That's why you've always felt detached from the game others play. Because when you're wired for kingdom assignments, counterfeit crowns can't seduce you. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. Matthew 6:19. Money is coming, but not because you manipulated algorithms or compromised your morals. It's not the fruit of hustle, but the reward of harmony. You walked in obedience even when it felt invisible. You moved at the speed of divine timing, not digital trends. And now the reversal is happening. There is a frequency shift in the spirit realm. Resources are magnetizing to your field, not because you begged, but because you became. You've been reshaped from consumer to creator, from survivalist to steward. And now, abundance is coming to fund what cannot be monetized. Freedom, healing, truth, restoration. Khadija Ali, a trauma-informed therapist from Detroit. She was offered a reality TV deal to turn her clinical practice into a drama-filled entertainment platform. The money was life-changing. The exposure could have made her famous, but she declined. Healing isn't performance, she said. Instead, she used a quiet grant to build a trauma center for children of incarcerated mothers. That's what it means to gather purpose, not just profit. Now, contrast her with Reed Callahan, a once respected tech entrepreneur who sold out his encryption patents to a conglomerate known for surveillance abuse. He made $150 million in 6 months and lost every ounce of public trust. His name, once associated with innovation, became synonymous with betrayal. He didn't build legacy. He bartered his voice for a vault. His bank is full, but his story is bankrupt. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Matthew 16:26. Wealth without clarity is danger. Prosperity without purpose is pollution. But you, chosen one, are being prepared for a type of resource that comes with assignment-specific activation. The money you're receiving is not for you to flex. It's for you to free others. Have you noticed you're dreaming differently lately? That your prayers are not about what you can buy, but what you can build. God is not just giving you income. He's giving you infrastructure. You're receiving resources to build safe spaces, educational centers, digital sanctuaries, trauma-informed ministries, and economic ecosystems for those who've been invisible for too long. You're not gathering to store. You're gathering to sow with strategy. Even in biology, a healthy river does not hoard water. It flows. The moment it stagnates, bacteria forms. The moment it clogs, death follows. You are a river now. You've been carved through seasons of drought and pressure. But now you're being released to channel living water, to irrigate generational fields. The generous will themselves be blessed, for they share their food with the poor. Proverbs 22:9. Let me tell you about Zion Marek, but very real soul. A former foster youth who grew up in 12 different homes by age 16, Zion inherited a small inheritance from a biological aunt he never met. Instead of buying a car, he started a micro-scholarship fund for teens aging out of the foster system. No one built a bridge for me, he said, so I became one. He gathered money, but what he was really gathering was purpose with generational velocity. You're not just collecting dollars, you're collecting destinies. You're building equity, not in the stock market, but in heaven's economy. You're birthing systems, not just businesses. You're funding answers to prayers you once whispered through your own tears. That's what real prosperity looks like. And God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all things at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. 2 Corinthians 9:8. You'll create safe houses for survivors. You'll fund technology that protects rather than exploits. You'll raise scholarships for brilliant minds trapped in broken zip codes. You'll finance films that heal instead of hype trauma. You'll birth solutions, not trends. And when the world asks how you did it, you won't boast about your branding. You'll talk about your obedience. Have you realized yet that your greatest abundance isn't what enters your hand? It's what flows through your spirit. That what you're gathering isn't currency, it's capacity. This is abundance with blueprints. This is wealth with heavenly coding. This is currency calibrated to purpose. The reason God is trusting you with this level of access is because you passed every test in silence. You didn't just stay pure in public. You stayed aligned in the private places where applause couldn't reach. And now, you are the divine banker of kingdom vision, a vessel of velocity, a divine data stream of generational recalibration. He who is faithful in a very little thing is faithful also in much. Luke 16:10. You didn't manipulate to get here. You matured. You didn't sacrifice your soul. You sacrificed your timeline. You were loyal when it was lonely. You were focused when no one clapped. And now, the compensation coming isn't just money, it's divine momentum. This is heaven's reward for those who didn't compromise for coins, for those who walked away from hollow gold and chose holy ground instead. You are not here to flaunt, you are here to fund freedom. So, prepare yourself, because what's coming will not ask who you were, but who you've become. You're not stepping into more for ego, you're stepping into it for impact. Preparation is not just about budgeting. It's about building capacity in your character. The higher you go, the deeper your roots must grow. Like an eagle that sheds its feathers to fly higher, you've let go of what once kept you grounded so you can soar on winds of purpose. Your hands are about to hold blueprints heaven has never released until now. And these aren't just ideas. They are divine instructions encoded with deliverance. You'll see visions in dreams that match the whispers you once heard in prayer closets. You'll sketch designs that serve the broken, not just the branded. Like Raquel Torres, a single mother in Arizona who turned her backyard into a learning garden for neighborhood kids. Her obedience became the blueprint for 12 other families to do the same. These are the kinds of ordinary builders heaven uses to release extraordinary plans. Your voice is about to unlock vaults of opportunity for others. Words that once trembled will now activate. Rooms will pause when you speak, not because of volume, but because of vibration. Like a tuning fork, your presence will bring frequency alignment to those who've forgotten their pitch. You won't be the loudest, but you'll be the clearest. And your tone will remind the forgotten they still have worth. Your giving will ripple into nations, not just through checks, but through choice. Every generous act, no matter how small, will echo into places you may never physically visit. Like Ezekiel Monroe, a retired mechanic in Georgia, who used his pension to pay off school lunch debt in his district. His story didn't trend, but it transformed 312 families who could finally breathe again. That's the kind of seed that travels faster than news. And your obedience will rewrite bloodline legacies. The curses that strangled generations before you are breaking because you listened. You are editing the script with each act of faith, deleting dysfunction and inserting divine patterns. Your children will live under words you whispered in pain. Your grandchildren will stand on ground you reclaimed through surrender. You're not just changing your family, you're rerouting history. You're not just gathering money, you're gathering what cannot be bought. Purpose that liberates, and purpose never expires. It multiplies, breathes, and passes itself through generations like oxygen through open lungs. This is wealth that breeds freedom, not bondage. And that's why heaven trusts you now, because you finally see money not as a master, but as a mission, not as status, but as seed. Chapter 6. The enemy fears your impact, not your income. Chosen one, have you ever noticed how your financial journey has felt less like a path and more like a battlefield? Why is it that every time you're on the verge of breakthrough, something unseen snatches it away? Why does it feel like you have to push through cement just to make the kind of progress others seem to achieve by gliding? This isn't random. It's not because you're cursed or because you're unworthy. It's because your presence is dangerous to darkness once you're resourced. You don't just make money, you make movements. You don't just accumulate, you activate. You were never just chasing income. You were called to release impact, You carry a divine frequency that disturbs systems of injustice, and the enemy knows it. You pray like a prophet, give like a fountain, create like an architect, and discern like a warrior. Your heart is tuned to heaven's frequency, and that kind of alignment can't be bought. You don't chase trends, you carry templates, and because you're not just building for yourself, but for generations, every coin heaven puts in your hands becomes dangerous to hell. That's why you were resisted. Because when you're resourced, you'll rewrite generational narratives. You'll build safe houses in deserts. You'll fund ministries that break chains, support single mothers, house the homeless, and breathe oxygen into forgotten dreams. You won't buy designer chains. You'll break spiritual ones. You won't throw money at status. You'll plant into souls. And this terrifies the enemy. Not your bank account, but your blueprint. Not your assets, but your assignment. Do you really think all those delays were just coincidence? Every time you were lied to in business, every time someone used you, every opportunity that evaporated last minute, those were not random. Those were strategic strikes from the enemy meant to exhaust your hope. But even in lack, you sowed. Even in drought, you praised. Even when your name wasn't known, you carried heaven's weight. And every time you tithed while struggling, you were passing divine tests in hidden classrooms. Because God needed to know, can I trust you with power that won't corrupt you? Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. Luke 16:10. And now heaven is shifting. God is releasing the floodgates, not because you're lucky, but because you're ready. What was once resisted is now being released by divine command. Because the truth is, the devil may have slowed your income, but he couldn't stop your impact. You kept giving, building, nurturing. Like an underground river cutting through stone, your faith moved in silence but carved legacy. Now, God is matching your invisible obedience with visible provision. This isn't just financial favor, it's spiritual positioning. You're not being promoted to perform, you're being positioned to propel. Think of Esther. It wasn't her beauty that saved a nation, it was her positioning. God placed her in the palace not for comfort, but for divine confrontation. You're not just rising in status, you're rising in spiritual voltage. This isn't about influence, it's about authority. You weren't called to be popular, you were called to be principled. Even when no one saw, you moved in silence like a jaguar in the night, focused, disciplined, and discerning. That's why your voice carries weight, because you earned it in the wilderness, not in the spotlight. Be strong and courageous, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Joshua 1:9. What kind of atmosphere will your presence shift when you walk into a room? Maria Lopez, a school janitor in a broken neighborhood in Peru. She made less than minimum wage, yet every Friday she brought bread for students who had nothing. Years later, those students became doctors, teachers, and leaders. They never forgot the woman who gave in secret. Maria died with little, but built impact beyond measurement. She didn't need a title. She was heaven's strategy. She proved wealth is a tool, not a goal. And then there's the warning. Bernard L., a hedge fund CEO in New York. He gained billions by exploiting vulnerable communities with predatory loans. But when scandal erupted, his empire crumbled. His name is now a cautionary tale in ethics courses. Why? Because income without integrity collapses under its own weight. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Mark 8:36. Will you protect your soul as fiercely as your bank account? You're being given divine permission to fund the vision, to invest in what outlives you. Like Nehemiah rebuilding the wall, your hands aren't just building, they're restoring identity to people who forgot they mattered. Your time in lack was never punishment. It was refinement. It shaped your generosity, anchored your motives, and purified your strategy. That's why this next level of provision won't destroy you. it'll deploy you. You'll be heaven's financier, not just earth's consumer. Your wealth will multiply peace, not problems. You'll launch restoration centers, healing hubs, scholarships, sanctuaries. This is not prosperity gospel, it's purpose gospel. Like eagles who soar above storms, you weren't built to flap in panic. You were designed to glide in altitude. When storms come, your wings spread wider, not smaller. That's how your spirit has been trained. Financial warfare was your turbulence, but impact is your elevation. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. Isaiah 40:31. Will you soar or settle? The enemy tried to exhaust your seed, but he couldn't reach your soil. And now that heaven sees you're mature enough to plant purpose, the harvest will be unstoppable. Because what's coming through you is not about vanity, it's about victory. And every dollar will become a sword, every resource a bridge, every gift a weapon of healing. Chapter 7. You're not just getting rich. They thought this was about wealth, about the cars you'd park, the houses you'd decorate, the bank accounts you'd finally watch multiply. But chosen one, it was never about collecting things. It was always about constructing something that would outlast trends, applause, and even your name. Earthly treasures rust, but spiritual blueprints endure. Heaven didn't anoint you to accumulate trinkets, it anointed you to architect territories. What heaven had in mind for you was never confined to dollar signs or designer labels. Those are too fragile, too fleeting for the mantle on your life. You weren't just called to get rich, you were called to become a foundation, a living framework that holds others when the storms of history come. Do you understand the gravity of that? God didn't mark you for flash, He marked you for function. You weren't sculpted for shallow prosperity, but for structural purpose. The type of wealth you're entering has weight, not because of what it can buy, but because of what it will build. You're not being crowned with comfort, you're being cemented into covenant. Heaven didn't train you to build a lifestyle, it trained you to build a legacy system that transmits faith, clarity, and divine order. And to do that, God had to excavate every fragile belief, every faulty self-image, every broken framework that couldn't carry the next generation's future. For no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. 1 Corinthians 3:11. You became the answer to a blueprint someone else begged for. You're not just a name in your family, you're the divine infrastructure of restoration. Your life became the architectural answer to generational petitions your ancestors didn't even have language for. Their silence sowed the seed. Your yes is becoming the frame. Their pain planted something in the spirit. But you are engineering the outcome. And what you're building doesn't just disrupt family patterns. It alters spiritual inheritance roots. This wealth you're attracting isn't just financial. It's cultural, emotional, psychological. It holds the power to demolish strongholds that crippled generations before you. Why do you think the pressure on your life has been relentless? Why do you think you were attacked before you even had resources? Because foundations aren't born. They're forged through silence, under spiritual tectonics, in seasons where no applause echoed. The deeper the weight, the deeper the excavation. Like the invisible steel grid beneath every skyscraper, your invisible process was sacred architecture. God was testing your spiritual load-bearing capacity. Could you hold vision without entitlement? Could you absorb weight without ego? Could you withstand blessing pressure without emotional collapse? The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Psalm 118, verse 22. Now, look again. All those nights you thought you were breaking, you were actually settling into divine load lines. Every lonely season, every delayed door was a measurement. God was calibrating your internal strength to carry multi-generational impact. And now, you're not just launching a business, a ministry, or a movement. You are the core frame. You are becoming spiritual infrastructure, a launch pad for nations and neighborhoods you may never even meet. Take Dr. Tererai Trent, a Zimbabwean visionary once denied access to school. Her dream was literally buried, written down and sealed in a tin box beneath a rock. Years later, she fulfilled every goal. Not just for herself, but for thousands of girls across Africa. Oprah called her one of the most inspiring women on earth, not because of her wealth, but because of what she built. That is what you're becoming, a buried seed that turned into a generational blueprint. But never forget, every true foundation has its counterforce. Bernie Madoff, once praised as a financial genius, engineered a hollow empire. He manipulated trust, fabricated wealth, and disrupted thousands of destinies through greed. His structure looked solid until the shaking came, and when it did, his empire crumbled under its own deception, because anything built on illusion will disintegrate when tested by time. The wise woman builds her house, but with her own hands the foolish one tears hers down. Proverbs 14:1. That is not your legacy. Your legacy is mangrove deep. In nature, the mangrove tree survives in corrosive saltwater by extending intricate tangled roots that intertwine with others. It doesn't just stand tall. It stabilizes ecosystems. That's you. You are not rising in isolation. You are anchoring everything around you. Your financial ascent is not just vertical. It's horizontal, systemic, communal. Can you feel the internal shift? That this season isn't about more, it's about meaning. You're the one in your family line who finally said, "It ends with me." You weren't born just to recover, you were born to reconstruct. The money coming into your hands is consecrated. It's intercession-powered capital, designed to heal trauma, rehouse broken dreams, and turn exile into ecosystem. You're laying bricks of clarity. You're opening spaces for healing. You're building financial architecture that carries frequency-coded freedom. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap. He seats them with princes. 1 Samuel 2:8. There are people alive right now who will never know your name, but they will live inside what you built. Like Mariam, a community architect born in war-torn Lebanon, orphaned at 9. She never got interviewed, but she pioneered trauma-responsive schools for displaced children. Now hundreds graduate yearly into futures her silence made possible. Her work isn't loud, it's load-bearing, and so is yours. You don't need validation, you need vision. You weren't made to be popular, you were constructed to be trusted. And trust is the rarest currency in the kingdom. God didn't choose you for applause, He chose you for accuracy. He didn't select you because of perfection. He selected you because He could build through you without breakage. Though the mountains be shaken and the hills be removed, yet my unfailing love for you will not be shaken. Isaiah 54:10. Now you've become the first to say, "This blessing begins with me." You spoke what others only whispered. You dared to believe your obedience could shift a timeline. You declared war on silence and called legacy out of the dust. You disrupted generational patterns by doing something radical, believing that you were the beginning of restoration. But the mercy of the Lord is from everlasting to everlasting on those who fear Him, and His righteousness to children's children. Psalm 103:17. You're the first to think in decades, not days. You don't just dream for your children, you make room for your great-grandchildren. You traded short-term applause for long-term alignment. The language of your vision is now generational. You no longer ask, "What can I get?" but "What am I building that will last beyond me?" Could it be that your vision is not delayed, it's just been calibrated for eternity? You're the first to choose substance over surface. You stopped performing for eyes that didn't see you and began building with stones no one else valued. While others decorate their image, you reinforce your core. Foundations aren't glamorous, but they are eternal. The applause of man fades, but the weight of heaven remains. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Matthew 6:19-20. You're the first to host legacy, not just chase it. Legacy lives where discipline dwells. It cannot be possessed by the impatient. You became the resting place of generational strategy. You became the house where eternity feels safe. What you carry is not fast, it's foundational. Are you willing to carry greatness quietly, knowing heaven is watching what man overlooks? Your home will vibrate with healing. Even your silence will minister. Your furniture will carry peace. Your children will eat in safety and rest in spiritual clarity. What you build inside your walls will echo long after your voice is gone. Your structures will sing with purpose. Every system you create, in business, ministry, or relationship, will hum in heaven's key. You're not just setting goals, you're building resonance chambers for divine flow. What you manage in excellence today will become the architecture of healing tomorrow. Your stillness will echo wisdom. You no longer rush to explain. You govern with restraint. You are not loud, but you are loud in the spirit. You are trusted with silence because your presence already speaks. God has trained you to speak when necessary and build always. You're not just wealthy, you are weight certified. You've been through the furnace. You've passed the pressure tests. Wealth is not your master, it's your material. God can trust you with provision because He refined your motives before He released your resources. You're not just visible, you are vital to heaven's blueprint. Like collagen under skin or the gravity-holding planets in orbit, your presence may be unseen by man, but not by God. You are hidden, but holding everything together. Your role isn't to be loud, it's to be load-bearing. And what God is constructing through you will not collapse. It has been reinforced by delay, fireproofed by pain, and tested by silence. Heaven signed off on the structure before man ever saw the scaffolding. Your legacy is not temporary, it's tectonic. It will ripple across bloodlines, timelines, and nations. What you're building will impact people you'll never meet, in languages you don't speak, through systems you may never see. Your obedience is multilingual. Your legacy is transgenerational. This is not luxury. This is legacy. This is foundation work. This is you. Chapter 8. You're not building for now. You're building for never again. They thought you were rebuilding a life, a home, a name, a future. But in heaven's eyes, you were doing something far more disruptive. You were rewriting history, not the kind that ends up in textbooks, but the kind that lives in bloodlines. You weren't called to merely recover what was lost. You were sent to build something so whole, so sound, that the dysfunction of your lineage could never repeat itself again. You're not just a builder of structures. You're an architect of interruption, the kind of interruption that dares to say, never again will fear lead, never again will scarcity speak, never again will silence protect shame. You weren't raised to see the pattern. You were raised to break it. That's why you've always felt misaligned with the dysfunction around you, because your spirit was never created to submit to it. It was commissioned to stop it. They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. Isaiah 61:4. This is why it's been heavy. Not because you're weak, but because you're carrying time. The unspoken prayers of the past and the unseen needs of the future, both converging in your obedience. Every yes you give God is retroactive healing for what was broken before you, and prophetic infrastructure for those who will walk after you. You're not just shifting your life, you're rerouting legacy. You've become the hinge between what should have never happened and what will never happen again. That's why the resistance wasn't random. It was strategic. Hell doesn't fight what doesn't threaten it, but your very presence on this earth is a threat to everything that once ruled your bloodline. You didn't just break chains, you are now blueprinting new cycles, cycles of wellness, of clarity, of spiritual clarity and emotional safety. You're building in such a way that your children and those spiritually assigned to you will never have to recover from what you endured in silence. Your discipline is canceling trauma. Your forgiveness is engineering peace. Your boundaries are not walls of defense, they are generational gates of safety. The righteous lead blameless lives. Blessed are their children after them. Proverbs 27. You're not just fixing what went wrong, you're designing what should have been right all along. Like a silent reformer, you're not asking for justice through revenge. You're enacting it through reconstruction. This isn't about applause. This is about protection, the kind of protection that is preventative, not reactive. Hajime Narukawa, the Japanese architect who reimagined the world map so it would be more accurate and less distorted, challenging a global visual lie taught for centuries. His work didn't trend, it didn't flatter empires, but it told the truth, corrected perception, and restructured how the world saw itself. That's the kind of spiritual work you're doing. Quiet, radical, corrective, eternal. By contrast, think of Adam Neumann, the co-founder of WeWork, a visionary who preached transformation but built on illusion. What collapsed wasn't just a company, it was trust. He sold identity without substance. And when time tested his foundation, it crumbled, because charisma without character can only carry so far. But what you're building isn't surface, it's seismic. You are not being called to lead a movement based on trends. You're being formed to become a movement that outlasts time. The kind of movement that builds schools no one claps for, funds homes no one photographs, and rewrites what generations call normal. You don't need credit, you carry covenant. Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Psalm 127:1. Your life is not a performance, it is a prevention. You are living proof that divine design can be stronger than inherited patterns. You are constructing not for comfort, but for continuity. Everything you touch is becoming encoded with instructions. This is how safety feels. This is how freedom speaks. This is how legacy behaves. You don't move quickly because you're lazy. You move slowly because you're calculating spiritual durability. You're testing the soul density of every decision, asking, will this still hold when I'm gone? Your decisions are no longer transactional, they are tectonic. Could it be that your boundaries are the final act of deliverance for someone you'll never meet? That's why you don't chase visibility. You honor your spiritual weight. You don't speak to be heard, you speak to be trusted. Your voice is not volume, it's voltage. And every word you release has been wired through pain, silence, and divine formation. You are not just a monument in motion, you are a living recalibration point, the kind of person heaven trusts to be invisible now, so that others don't have to be invisible later. What you're building is not performance, it is protection. And some of the greatest builders never end up on stages, but they are written into timelines. Take Marisol Hernandez, a single mother from a small town in southern Texas. No spotlight, no platform. But after surviving decades of domestic violence and poverty, she made one quiet decision that changed everything. She enrolled in night school, graduated, and opened a small trauma-informed daycare in her neighborhood. Not for profit, but for prevention. She said, "If I can keep even one child from feeling what I felt, then I've won." Today, her center has raised hundreds of children with safety and love their homes couldn't provide. Her name may never trend, but her obedience has become a spiritual firewall for an entire community. What made her dangerous to darkness wasn't her reach. It was her refusal to repeat what once broke her. And that's what makes you dangerous too. You don't look like a threat, but you are a walking disruption to what should have recycled again. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalm 34:18. So no, you're not building for now. You're building for never again. You're laying stone with your silence. You're erecting walls with your wisdom. You're roofing futures with your prayers. And even if no one sees the structure until long after you're gone, heaven will always know who started it. This is not temporary transformation. This is eternal protection. This is foundation work. This is what you were born to build. And if you are listening, chosen one, understand this. You are not anointed simply to be rich. You are called to create a legacy. Money is not an end prize, but a tool in the hands of the chosen to establish eternal things. What you are building is not just a fortune. It is an everlasting mark in the spirit world, a blessing to a generation you will never meet, a gateway to those who are silently watching. You are sowing not just by work, but by faithfulness. You are reaping not just by wisdom, but by being steadfast when no one is looking. And you are giving, not just to God, but to the mission He placed in your heart before you were born. If today's content has touched you, I invite you to explore more liberating and profound messages on my YouTube channel. There you will find in-depth spiritual prophetic videos, practical teachings tailored to the chosen one's journey, and divine strategies to help you step into your blessings at the right time and in the right way. Don't forget to like and share this video with others who are also on their journey of awakening and resetting their destiny. Leave a comment. I want to know where you are in your legacy building journey. And subscribe so you don't miss any of my videos, because every word I share comes from true guidance and is never random. Whether you send a super thanks or simply listen with an open heart, I am so grateful. It is your presence that creates a community of chosen ones, people who are quietly but powerfully changing the world. May you be blessed in all things, in your soul, in your finances, in your relationships, and in your mission. May the arms of God lift you above all doubt, and may everything you touch carry the fragrance of eternity. Until next time, stay faithful, stay set apart, and keep building what only heaven can fund. Blessings, chosen one.